Ruben Gallego slams Kristi Noem, and what happened next stunned everyone watching. Picture this moment: millions of Americans being told to tighten their belts, 13 million on the brink of losing Medicaid, families wondering how they'll pay for medication, and workers trying to stretch every dollar. And in the middle of all that, a cabinet secretary asking taxpayers for a $50 million luxury jet. That contradiction alone is explosive, but what unfolded when Gallego confronted her was a political gut punch that exposed far more than one outrageous request.
Gallego.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Secretary Noem, for attendance today. Let me start by also agreeing with Senator Moreno on some things, and I think it is positive the Trump administration has provided stronger border security to keep illegal border crossings as close to zero as possible. We definitely have seen that in Arizona. My concern is that it's not sustainable. It's expensive. And that's why I recently released a common sense border security that would make it sustainable and would actually deliver long-term solutions. But let me get to my first question. Your department is overspending right now. It's on track to run out of money again by mid-July to support a mass deportation campaign that can't be afforded. At the same time, though, you recently requested a $50 million allotment for a private Gulfstream jet. That's $50 million of taxpayer money to subsidize some of your national tours that you've been going on. Meanwhile, Republicans are about to kick another 13 million people off Medicaid to fund taxes for the rich on the backs of some working-class Americans. So how can you justify spending millions, 50 million, on a jet while your department is definitely overspending, and Republicans in Congress are about to strip also health care from millions of Americans?
Well, Senator, thank you for the question. We are spending our dollars appropriately and will be on budget. When your reference to the airframe that was the requested dollars were put in for, that's for the Coast Guard. It's to replace an existing jet that is over 20 years old and is beyond its usable hours. And the Coast Guard for many, many years has been neglected and has many airframe that have been grounded because they can't even be maintained anymore. The suppliers that give us parts and repairs and maintenance for them have said that they'll no longer support that kind of a mission. We have cutters that haven't been completed, that haven't been deployed out across the world. And then we also, beyond that, are asking for a request to build out the number of Coast Guard members that we need in place. We're asking for 15,000 more to complete the missions that are going forward.
Are you going to have access to that $50 million Gulfstream jet that the Coast Guard is going to supply?
The Coast Guard will use that jet exactly how it uses the jets that it has today, exactly in the same manner that it uses the ones that it has in place today.
So would you consistently be using it to travel?
I don't know if I would use that one or if I would use the other one. I have no idea. But I do spend time out there with our components, making sure that they are know that they have a secretary that's engaged with them, that's visiting with them, seeing what their needs are. No, sir, they're not photos. They've meant the world to the individuals at the Department of Homeland Security. They have meant the world to our ICE agents, our border agents. When they ask me to be out there with them, so they know what their lives are like.
Talking to some law enforcement, besides those under DHS, we've also seen some law enforcement that have been pulled away from investigations, such as child porn, sex trafficking. We've had some agents pulled in that were doing investigations on bank fraud that are now, provisional ICE agents. And I think creating and making them do this type of work is also making us more and more dangerous, since they're not actually doing this long-term investigation. On the other hand, I have talked to some border chiefs and sheriffs repeatedly, and they've been highlighting the danger associated with cartels targeting teenagers in border communities through social media apps and recruiting them to participate in smuggling operations. And one of the bills I introduced with several colleagues here, actually, is the Combating Cartels on Social Media Act, which will help DHS counter this threat. Arizona communities cannot wait for the legislative process to play out on this. What is DHS doing to solve this problem and help keep American children and communities safe from cartel criminal activity and recruitment too?
Well, that is the problem that we have. With the longer that they're here, the more established they become and the more they recruit individuals who may live in this country, U.S. citizens, or even our kids, to be a part of
some
their
of them are
operations.
actually on the other side too. It's both sides.
What do you mean on their side?
Some of the cartels are using social media on, let's say, Mexico,
yes,
wherever.
Yes, definitely they are.
So it's back and forth.
Yes, they definitely are. But they also are infiltrating our country still by recruiting our children to be a part of their networks.
That's the problem. Yeah.
So we're working with not just the experts that we have within CBP and ICE, but also using our other components to address some of the sophistication that we've seen in these apps, as far as CISA and partnerships that they may have with private industry that can give us insight in what we can do to deploy our own counter-terrorist activities and applications to those systems, what we can do to make sure that we're stopping their ability to communicate with our children and bringing awareness. The Department of Homeland Security has programs in different areas, such as the Know to Protect and the other programs you may be familiar with.
Have you been able to work directly with the social media companies, though, not just through the legislative process?
We have had conversations with the social media companies. And
because by the time we get around to doing it, we're losing more and more people. So like having a very direct conversation in a concentrated effort to actually have outcomes is going to be quicker because they have the option to do it. We don't have to come in and do it. They just choose not to because they'd rather make more money than anything else.
Well, that may be, but I found them very willing to come to the table. I've had myself spent dozens of hours with them, and my team has spent hundreds of hours visiting with them on what we can do to be much more proactive. So they've got some solutions that we can pursue. We'll be coming to you with some of those ideas, but I think it's important that we use their knowledge of this way of communication and recruitment to help protect our children.
Get back.
Senator Ernst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary.
It revealed a mindset, a pattern, and a glimpse into where power in this government is truly flowing. Stay locked in, because the deeper you look, the more troubling it becomes. Gallego came prepared. He wasn't there to dance around the edges. He walked straight into the hearing with one brutal question: why is DHS overspending, on track to run out of money, and still asking for a jet most CEOs couldn't afford? The tension didn't simmer, it snapped instantly. And the second those words hit the air, the temperature in the room shifted. Noem leaned on a talking point she clearly thought would save her. She claimed it wasn't a luxury purchase, it was for the Coast Guard, a replacement for a 20-year-old aircraft supposedly beyond repair. But even as she spoke, you could practically feel the grip slipping. The justification didn't land, not with the audience and definitely not with Gallego, who was already pressing forward. Because if the story was really that simple, why did every answer sound fuzzier than the last? When he asked the obvious follow-up, whether she herself would be using this aircraft, everything fell apart. Her answer wasn't firm. It wasn't confident, it wasn't even clear. It was awkward, uncertain, and evasive. She said she didn't know whether she'd be using that jet or the other one, creating an even stranger implication that this wasn't about mission needs at all, but about access. The kind of access that raises eyebrows, the kind of access that feeds rumors. Rumors that have been floating online for months, speculation that certain DHS leadership figures have been using official travel to boost visibility, take political-style tours, and gain national attention under the guise of agency work. None of that's proven, but the timing is hard to ignore, especially when you place it alongside a $50 million aircraft request during a budget crisis. And that's the part that makes this confrontation so damning. DHS is running out of money, not next year, within months. Their deportation programs are burning through cash faster than Congress can refill it. At the exact same moment, millions of Americans are set to lose Medicaid because lawmakers claim the country can't afford it anymore. Wrap your head around that: healthcare cuts for families, but luxury upgrades for officials. If you were looking for a snapshot of upside-down priorities, you couldn't paint a clearer picture. Gallego pressed harder, and the answers only revealed more contradictions. DHS has repeatedly claimed it's staying on budget, but internal reports tell a different story, one of overspending on detention expansion, mass deportation operations that analysts say are financially unsustainable, and operational shortfalls in areas that actually protect the public. Even DHS insiders, speaking anonymously, have hinted that leadership has been funneling resources toward high-visibility enforcement theaters, while quietly stripping funding from long-term investigative units. Those whispers aren't confirmed, but they line up with what we're seeing: the disappearance of personnel from teams that handle child exploitation cases, cyber threats, trafficking networks, and organized crime investigations. These are the experts who track predators, fraud rings, and cartel networks using encrypted apps. Yet according to testimony, some of them are being reassigned to temporary ICE roles. That isn't just inefficient, it's dangerous. But the most chilling part: When Gallego pivoted to the issue of cartel recruitment targeting teenagers on social media, Noem admitted something quietly devastating: cartels are getting smarter, using encrypted messaging, short-life communication apps and cross-border networks to pull American kids into smuggling pipelines. This isn't an exaggerated movie plot, it's happening. Border sheriffs have been sounding the alarm for months that cartels lure teens with quick cash offers, promising easy pickups or short-haul drives that quickly spiral into criminal networks. And instead of reinvesting in digital security units, surveillance tech, cybercrime experts, or even public education programs to warn teens, DHS is requesting a jet. Just sit with that for a moment. When the threat is evolving online, when entire communities are being targeted through Instagram DMs, Snapchat relays, WhatsApp groups and other encrypted platforms, the priority becomes a plane. Not updated software. Not advanced monitoring tools. Not more boots for cybercrime and counter-trafficking teams. A plane. This is why Gallego's questioning hit so hard. Because he knew everyone in the room knew that this wasn't only about a budget line, this was about purpose, this was about priorities, and this was about honesty. Noem tried to recover by mentioning conversations with social media companies, saying her team has spent hundreds of hours pushing them for cooperation, but even that admission showed how backward the strategy has been. DHS is fighting 2026 threats with 2010 tactics, meetings and negotiations instead of innovation and investment. Reports claim multiple tech firms have been offering tools, warning systems, and even pilot programs that could support investigations, but DHS has been slow to adopt them. Whether that's bureaucratic resistance or leadership misalignment isn't clear, but the hesitation has real consequences, and the consequences go beyond social media. As more agents are pulled from organized crime or trafficking investigations and reassigned to mass deportation operations, cases stall, leads disappear. Long-term targets become harder to catch. This isn't speculation. Former agents have openly said that when experienced investigators are moved into ICE roles unrelated to their specialties, entire operations can collapse. That means more victims, more untracked crimes, more dangerous networks left running. Gallego circled back to the core question: how can DHS justify a $50 million jet while overspending, neglecting key departments, and participating in a political climate that is stripping healthcare access away from millions? Noem's voice didn't project confidence. She repeated that the request was for the Coast Guard, yet she acknowledged she might use the aircraft, though she had no idea. That kind of answer isn't just weak, it's suspicious. Because agencies do not request aircraft without planning who can use them. Every jet in the federal fleet has purpose, itinerary projections, and operational justification behind it. But here the explanation sounded like improvisation, and the public sees it. The disconnect is so glaring that you don't need a background in policy to feel something isn't adding up. Americans are being lectured about sacrifice. People losing Medicaid are told it's about fiscal discipline. Yet DHS wants a multi-million-dollar aircraft upgrade that looks more like an executive perk than a national security tool. If you ever needed a symbol of how detached government priorities can be from everyday reality, this is it. The plane isn't the scandal is what it represents: a government that can't afford health care for families, but can afford first-class luxuries for officials. A security department that claims to be cash-strapped while expanding the very programs draining its budget dry. A leadership structure that talks about safety while pulling agents off the cases that actually keep kids safe. This isn't just mismanagement. It's a profound contradiction between what leaders say and what they choose to fund. And when officials dodge accountability, the public suffers. When agencies highlight their engagement tours instead of fixing internal failures, trust erodes. When budgets are used as political weapons but not public tools, people fall through the cracks. But what makes Gallego's confrontation different is that it forced these contradictions into the open. It didn't allow for the usual polished evasions. He asked questions the public has been asking for months. Why a jet? Why now? Why during a budget shortfall? And most importantly, why during a moment when millions are losing health care? Every time Noem stumbled or deflected, the truth grew louder. The priorities at the top of DHS are misaligned with the needs of the people they serve. Instead of strengthening child protection units, they weaken them. Instead of funding digital defenses, they underinvest. Instead of stabilizing overstretched investigative teams, they reassign them. And instead of tightening their own belts, they ask for luxury upgrades. This is why the hearing went viral. This is why people across the political spectrum reacted with frustration, disbelief, and anger. Because the symbolism couldn't be clearer. Families are struggling, communities are unsafe, digital threats are rising, and while all of that unfolds, leadership is requesting private-style jets. So ask yourself, if you had $50 million of public money, would you spend it on a luxury aircraft, or would you fund programs that protect kids from cartel recruitment, restore critical investigations, and keep millions from losing health care? Because that's the real debate here, what kind of country we choose to be, and whose comfort we prioritize. If this breakdown opened your eyes or made you rethink where your tax dollars go, don't stay silent. Hit that like button, subscribe, and jump into the comments. Do you think government agencies should be buying luxury jets while cutting basic services and letting threats slip through the cracks? Your voice matters more than you think, and we'll keep pushing for accountability every step of the way.